Hi everyone, I'm Grandmaster Magesh Panchanathan, and welcome to the US Chess School class today. We're going to be studying opposite color bishop endgames, and I thought we'll start with some simple absolute basics. So because the theoretical endgames, of course, always are important, helps you make better decisions in practical endgames, right? So we could look at some practical examples, but before that, I wanted to really see how much of theoretical endgames that you all know and where we stand. So I'm going to start with this one. This is our first position, and we will start slowly working our way around understanding all theoretical situations before we go into anything else, right? So what's the result? I just want a result in chat. Let's initially, you've had a chance to actually look at it for some time now. So let's just go with the result. Zoe says not 0-1. Thank you, Zoe, for helping us out. I would like a draw or a white win, please. And as always, I would love to, of course, chat with all of you, talk to you, and hear your ideas as we go through this. By the way, all of you, I need a result in like 30 seconds. It doesn't matter if you get it right or wrong. I just want you to just tell me your intuitive result. As soon as you see this, what do you have? I don't know if we have a poll on this. Can we do a poll? Don't worry about it. Let's do the chat right now. So I'll give 15 more seconds. I haven't gotten some answers from all of you. Okay, so let's go ahead and continue now. Looks like I got 1-0 and draw. Anyone who wants to explain, let's say, a 1-0, raise your hand if you want to tell me why you think it's winning. Evan, let's go. Did I unmute you? Did someone want to talk about it? No? White flag, says Anish. No, probably not that way. All right, Austin wants to say something. Let's go, Austin.
Well, my intuition tells me that I could just go to the king to g7 and push the c pawn, and you're forced to lose the bishop.
So basically, just walk your king over to g7, right?
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Now, who wants to tell me from the draw perspective to go against Austin? Let's see. Okay. Evan?
I think it's a draw.
Why is it a draw? What about this plan that we just talked about here?
Well, not sure, but I think Black could switch the position of this bishop and king, maybe.
Bishop and king switch, okay? And that's how to make a draw, yeah? So when I try to get the king in this way, you want the bishop on c6 and the king on f7, yes?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and Gary?
I think it's probably a draw. That may be incorrect, but it just looks like Black should be able to blockade if they get the if they kind of have their king close enough to both pawns. So maybe like if they play king d7, I don't know whose move it is. But
let's say it's White's turn to play right now. Yeah, shouldn't really matter so much, but yeah.
So like king e5, king d7, king f5, some like I don't know, bishop h5 or something. Okay. Or maybe bishop h5 is a bad example, but bishop e8, king g5, and then king e6. And so the thing is, like, if you can control, and then king h6, king f7, and then if they try to go the other way on the c file, to the queen side, then you do the same thing. So okay. I think you can probably just hold tight with a blockade.
Okay, thank you. So basically, again, the idea of switching, right? So Okay, so interesting. I got both perspectives about a win and a draw. So this is unfortunately not possible to hold. White should be able to win because black doesn't have a lot of situations where they can hold this. There will be some simple zugzwang, and that will just, for example, the move that we just looked at is this bishop e8 situation, right? Even if you do get this situation on time, let's say wait, you suddenly run out of moves and you won't be able to achieve this exact king e6 and bishop e8 position. And I just simply get king g5 or king g6, depending on where the bishop is. And I get the king g7 situation, right? So usually this could be an easy win because the king just gets to g7, right? So if you have these two pawns, I have a friend who's a grandmaster who used to jokingly tell me that if you want to know if you're playing an opposite color bishop endgame, if you want to know it's winning with two pawns, if you can touch the pawns with your two fingers like this, then it's a draw. It needs to be far away, so you can't really touch them like this. But I guess it doesn't work depending on how long your fingers could be. But essentially, you need at least two files, yeah? You need at least two files. One file usually is just an easy draw. The bishop and the king will hold it together, unless, of course, the pawn goes to the sixth rank and the king goes to, let's say, g7 or c7. One of those things can still lead to a win if it's just one file. But otherwise, one file, you can safely say it's pretty much a draw. But two files, it gets interesting, and that's what we're going to be discussing today, is that, yeah, so when you have an entry point, you can just get the king in. Let's just say we try this bishop d5 kind of an idea, yeah? Actually, I don't want to play the moves. I want to do some calculation and make you answer. So king e5, king d7, king f5, bishop d5, let's say king g6 and king e8. What will white play to win? So again, the variation is king e5, king d7, king f5, bishop d5, king g6, king e8. Yeah. So basically, most of you have this. At some point, c6 just wins, right? So I cannot take because you have f7 check, and that's just basically game over. Okay, fair enough. This is a pretty straightforward endgame. Let's make things a little interesting. I'm going to try to move them one rank below. And let's see how we deal with that. I am just pulling everything one rank below. Again, I want a result from every one of you in 30 seconds. And then we'll figure out what we can talk about it more. First, intuitive result. And I would like to get from all of you. I should actually have a timer. That'll make it more official, yeah? Okay, time is almost up. I need an answer if you're still thinking about it. I need all of you to give me one of those results. All right. I got, again, a mixture of draw and win. Does someone want to explain? Again, I like to hear from a lot of new players as well. And of course, if you're already explained, you can still talk to. But if I see a new hand, I might give preference to that. But okay, right now I see Austin. Go on, Austin. Okay, Aradhya, yes.
Because now if we do the same thing, after the king switch, you can't possibly zigzag since the bishop has one more square. So I think this is a draw.
So not possible to make a zigzag, okay? Aradhya? You wanted to say something, I think? Maybe not anymore. All right. So does anyone agree? Oh, I have to unmute you. Sorry. There you go.
Yeah, like I was thinking the same thing as Austin. After like king e4, king d6, king f4, the same idea of I'm pretty sure bishop e7 would work because like first of all we can always go bishop d8 and also I think we're gonna switch in time.
You're gonna switch in time, so that's not gonna work. Okay, so I have heard two arguments for a draw. Does anyone want to, argue for a win? or probably try to refute it, because I did get a bunch of wins too. Yeah. So let's see. Okay, Gary, go on, Gary.
Maybe it's a win just because you don't necessarily need the zugzwang in the previous position to win. Because like maybe you can just push the c pawn anyway, and so eventually like.
How would you be able to push the c pawn if I get my king on, let's say e7 and bishop on d4? Would you be able to push the c pawn? Now you might not be able to, right? Because I'll simply take, and this pawn's not queening. Previous time you're queening this pawn.
Yeah, but I think well, at least for when the pawn goes to c5, the only way to hold both f6 and the c pawn is on bishop d4. So I think at some point you're still going to have to let me play c5.
The zugzwang again is what you mean. Basically,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay. So at some point you can always push the pawn a little further, I think. Maybe.
Okay. Anish, I see you're giving me some ideas. Do you want to talk about it, Anish? Where are you? Raise your hand if you want to. Okay, let's find you. Go on, Anish.
I think that white wins.
You think white's going to win? Okay. So we have a blanket statement. Why? Because black bishop controls f8 is what Aradhya is saying in chat. Okay, so we've had enough discussion to talk about what is going on. The only thing I usually ask when the position changes is how it affected my plans from before, right? So there are two things I did. One is, of course, I used my c pawn as a distraction to queen the f pawn when the pawn was on f6 and c5, which doesn't seem to work anymore. Because if I try to play some c5, the bishop will capture and still defend on f8. So that seems like a plan that just never is going to work. But the next option is to, of course, think of a zugzwang. Bishop on d4, king on e7, or king on e5, bishop on e7. These are the two setups where the bishop will guard both the pawns and the king will guard f6. And the king has to guard f6 because this king is going towards that route. Yeah. In terms of switching, it's still not realistic, because I don't think black will have enough time to get the king, and the bishop completely switched every single time the king moves over, right? So if I try to go this way, or if I try to go this way, or if I try to go this way, this is probably very far, but let's just think of e4 and h5 as entry points for the white king. I don't think black can switch, right? So let's try it. King e4, king d6. Let's say king f4. The zugzwang is actually still pretty straightforward. I don't see how black is stopping me from playing c5, like Gary pointed out. I'm going to play c5 and c6. And if I do play c5 and c6, we essentially got to the same endgame from before. Its only thing is the c pawn is on the 6th rank, and so the f pawn being on the 6th rank, right? Which shouldn't make any difference at all. It should still be a complete win, because I'll still go towards a bishop, and I should be able to win that game. And if you don't, I mean, you just cannot do anything else. The king moves, I get to play f6. So either you have to allow me to play f7, or you have to allow me to play c6. And both ways, I think we should be able to win. Yeah. Okay. Let's go around and say, let's keep, remember this, these endgames, I want you to be absolutely thorough, because in a game, you won't be calculating this. You'll be making a decision probably like 7 moves before and saying, I'm going to reach this endgame. Is this going to work or not going to work, right? How about we move diagonally a little bit in front? And let's say that's fine. Yep. What is the result? You can again type in chat. I'm still only getting a few. Probably have to call out each and every one of you for a result. I need results from all of you. I haven't got a result from Oscar, Royal, Angela, Kelsey. I want a result from all of you. Let's go. Jed. I did not give enough time. Well, this is not actually a time question. This question is more of an intuitive question. So you have to give me a result in 30 seconds. That is where I try to see what you can recognize in the position first. Then, of course, you can always think. Okay, so I'm getting a lot of results. I got a lot of draws. I got some wins. Okay, let's see. I think I have only one win if I'm right. Ashish, can you tell me why you think it's a win? Are you up for explaining your answer? Because I think everyone else is saying it's a draw.
I don't know. I thought like if the king gets to h6 and then h7 to g8, well, if king gets to h6, it's a win. But
Do you think the king will get to h6?
I don't know. When like king f5, king e7, there's also like d6 ideas, but there's like bishop g7. Yeah.
Okay, so you potentially see the white king getting to h6, or if the king goes to e7, you have d6. Let's see if someone, Ryo, wanted to speak. Ryo, tell me what you think.
Actually, I wasn't going to, but okay, sure, I can say it. I think it's a draw because like after the bishop goes to g7, you can move it along the diagonal, the very long diagonal. If he plays, first of all, he needs to defend the pawn, so like bishop f3, and after bishop g, for example, wait, whose turn is it right now?
Let's say it's white's turn to play.
King f5, bishop g7, bishop f3. And now I can play bishop a1, for example. And if you play king g5, I play bishop e5 with threat of king e5. And otherwise, the only thing is he can try to play.
Wait, I didn't hear. I didn't understand. Threat of king e5. What is king e5 doing?
Just stopping his king from coming back. And yeah, it will take a longer time because there's also 50 move rules. So yeah. And
okay, but I still don't get it. What is the king on e5 stopping from white king from doing? Where is the white king going?
So if he played king f5, bishop
g7 and bishop f3.
Bishop a1, for example.
Okay.
And king g5.
Okay.
So threat is king h6, and then I play bishop g7.
Okay, you go bishop g7, which is kind of important, yeah?
And now I want king e5, that's why.
Okay. You don't even need king e5, do you?
I know.
Yeah. So the whole idea is, okay, so you go king f5, bishop g7 here. The point is you have a nice blockade, which some of you already pointed out very early on, right? To say that there is no entry point for the king, right? So this is a simple way to summarize some of these things. If you want to win with the opposite color bishop endgame with your king, you need some entry point for the king. You need to basically win the bishop, right? If you don't win the bishop, you don't win the game. So in this particular case, I don't see how I can get in. So Ashish, you wanted to go to king h6, but I don't see how you're going to do that, right? Let's say I just wait. I can also wait king e7 and king d6, by the way. It's not a big problem. I can also move the bishop right now because you're still not going to h6. I can go bishop g7 now. And now I don't see how you will make progress, right? If you go king here, I will simply now move the king. I don't need to move the bishop anymore and no progress. But I think I have someone in chat asking me this question, which is probably what I'm going to ask. I think Aradhya, was it you? Yes. I'm going to ask, can white actually try a different winning plan? Let's see. I'll ask. Obviously, this doesn't work, right? Anish is saying king goes around. Aradhya said the same thing. Yes. What if I go around? Now, I'm actually going to not move the pieces, and we're going to try to understand this endgame by really solving it. And it's worth spending time in such endgames because once you really understand these endgames, like I said, it's going to help you make much better decisions going forward, right? All right. So first, assume that I'm playing white and I have a plan, right? My plan is to get my king all the way around, right? Now, you're playing black, and each one of you, I'll give you some time to think about this. I want you to come up with a way to defend it. You might not even need to defend it. I don't know. So if you feel like it's really not threatening, you don't need to. If you feel like there's some kind of a problem that you need to deal with, then you can try to create a defensive setup. But I want each one of you to come up with some defensive idea, okay? Let's see. I'll give you some time. Think about it, Anish, right? Think about it a little bit. Alexander Rotena has an idea. Okay, Alexander Wang. So I see what your plan is, Alexander Wang. Okay, let's see, Anish. Anish, I'd be careful with your plan. You have to think about it, because remember, the reason why there is a draw is because the king is on d6 and the bishop is on g7, and I don't have an entry point. Imagine in this position, if the king goes to g7 and bishop goes to d6, white can easily win by bringing the king around to c6. So I'd be very careful about switching the king and bishop, right? You want the bishop guarding the knight pawn. That's when you can really establish that blockade, right? So keep that in mind. Okay, Arnav has an idea. Okay. By the way, I'll tell you who are the ones who got this right. I think Arnav, your idea is correct, and so is Alexander Rutten. Angela, and who's the other one? Alexander Wang had the same idea on how you want to stop it. Rayo, I like your idea. All right, let's go ahead and discuss this now. So first question is, I always do this, is to see if an idea works, right? We don't need to panic if it doesn't even do anything. So for the fun of it, let's say white gets what they want to do and black does nothing. This is always a good place to start. Remember this, right? Particularly when you're analyzing an endgame like this and you have all the time in the world and you really want to understand the endgame, it's always good to start by saying simply do nothing, right? What does white do? So the king goes to, let's say, d3, c4. Okay, the bishop will be on f3, of course. And then I'm not going to draw these arrows. So let's say king goes to c4, king goes to b5, goes to b6, b7, c8, d8, and so forth, right? I want to really get in from here and try to win the game. So would f7 be the best square for the bishop? We don't know. This bishop could be anywhere. At this point, the bishop would be on e6, the bishop would be on f7, bishop would be on f3, bishop would be on b3. So many interesting options for the bishop. So we don't really mind. We don't really need to fix anything right now, yeah? We would simply say the bishop stays somewhere in your mind. It's flexible, right? We just defend the pawn. That's the only thing. Okay, so going forward, let's discuss this. Okay, so if the king goes to c8, if the king goes to d8 and e8, let's ignore it. That's just winning, right? We don't want to waste our time on that because I'll simply play king f7, I'll win the game, right? All this time, of course, I'm going to defend this pawn. That's the idea. So that's going to win the game, right? No worries. So what if I stop you on d8? What if the king's on c8 and I stop you on d8? Can you win the game? Basically the same setup, right? Evan has a good point. Simply do nothing. You're running into another zugzwang, right? Bishop moves is a zugzwang. Yeah. So you get your king to c8 and you simply, let's say your bishop is on f3, you go bishop g2 or something. It's a zugzwang. If the bishop moves this way, g7 wins. If the bishop moves anywhere in this diagonal, king d8 wins. But I have one question, which is still kind of interesting. Again, it'll be so much easier if I move the pieces, but I think it's fun to calculate it without moving the pieces to try to visualize it, right? So assume your king got to c8 and I got into a zugzwang and I decided to play king e7. How would you win that? So you will obviously play king c7, I'm guessing, yeah? And Zoe says king c7, king c6, fair enough. You'll play king c7 and king c6. I'll play, let's say, bishop e5. And my bishop is on e5 and king on e7. How do you win? How about this? I'll make this a little bit more interesting. I'm going to give you only one shot. So all of you, hold on to your chat, right? So this time I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to think about it, but you have only one shot at getting it because I want you to make sure that you look at all the defensive resources and you want to find the clear winning plan. So the white king is on c6, black king is on e7, and black bishop is on e5. And white needs to win. You start the timer. Okay, so now I'm getting answers. Let's see. Okay, so Ashish, I don't think we got it right. Arnav, no. Alexander, no. Sarvagna, you got it? So yeah, I don't think we have it completely. Aryan, if you bring the king around, you'll be starting to the same position. This is where we were. Don't forget that. To the queen side, isn't your king already on the queen side, Aryan? The king is on c6, right? Where are you bringing it? Aradhya, your plan is good, but still not going to completely work. Okay, so let's try this. Does someone want to talk about their plan? So it looks like I'm going to ask Sir Wagner to give his idea because he has found the correct idea. But before that, I want to see if somebody wants to try it. Who wants to try to create a win here? Raise your hand if you want to speak. It's okay if it doesn't work or if it works, either ways, because we can all learn by saying how the defensive idea works, right? Or how exactly your opponent is going to defend to that plan. All right, I see Gary, go on.
Okay. So my plan. I think in the chat I mistyped. What I wrote was impossible.
What was your plan again? Explain your plan first. Yeah.
Okay. Well. Okay. So basically, what you want to do is you want to have a position where you have an idea of playing d6,
Okay.
takes, and then where you have an idea of playing d6, bishop takes, and then g7.
Okay.
And so I would put the bishop on the a2 g8 diagonal, like preferably like a2 b3 c4.
Okay.
Just because otherwise it can be attacked. And so then at some point you're going to play d6.
So let's visualize this, right? Your king is on c6, my king is on e7, and bishop is on e5, and let's say your bishop is on c4.
Mm.
I want you to think about what black would do.
Well, black maybe could go for king f8.
Well, you're going to play d6.
Yeah.
And if you play d6, I'm lost. So what can black really do? Does anyone have a move? You can also tell me. What do you think black would do? Yep, Zoe, I think, has a point. Yes, king f6 hits g6. I think others are also mentioning that right now. What do you do if I play king f6? I'm hitting g6. So you don't have time to play d6 because I'll play bishop takes d6 if you play d6. And you might have to just come back to defend the pawn. Your bishop will just literally have to come back to d3 or c2 or b1, wherever you are. So you can be on a2, b3, or c4. So anyone who suggested this plan, this is a problem, right? You put the bishop on this diagonal. The minute you do that, I'm going to play king f6. I'm going to ask your bishop to come back to b1, and then I'm going to go right back to e7. And we're going to be in the same situation where we started, right? And Joe, I think now you have it. You have the answer correct now. But I have one more person. Someone suggested, okay, Arnav, you were suggesting a plan. Do you want to talk about it? Go on, Arnav. Oh, I can't hear you for some reason. I don't know what's going on. Okay, not sure. That's okay. Don't worry about it. So someone was suggesting the bishop on e6, right? I think Arnav, you also did that, and I think someone else also did that. So what is the problem with the bishop on e6? Aradhya. So you want to tell me, Aradhya?
Wait, like what are you calling? I just said I think I was talking about having the bishop on e6.
Good. So I want you to look at that. Tell me, can you win with the bishop on e6 and create a zugzwang?
Yeah, that's what I was trying to make work because I was thinking to go bishop g8 at some point and then d6. But now I come to think of it, I don't think I can really get that position.
Yep. The problem with the bishop on e6, f7, or g8, right, is one thing. First, if the bishop is on f7, it guards both the pawns. Problem is you never play g7 because the king will take the bishop, right? So if my king is on e7, I can happily move back anywhere in this diagonal and you really don't get much, right? So the bishop on f7 doesn't work for that reason. Bishop on g8 also doesn't work because when you play g7, you're not threatening the queen. So if you play something like d6, bishop takes d6, and you play g7, king f6 will just simply win the pawn. So bishop on g8 also doesn't work. And bishop on e6, we can say, is the same reason why it doesn't work, because I will play king f6 and hit the pawn. I'll keep hitting the pawn, and you have to defend it, right? So that's the only drawback. Now, this leaves us with only two other plans, okay? I can put my bishop on h7 or h5. Yep, I can try to take bishop e6, bishop e7, bishop g8, bishop h7, because then g7 will become a real threat. Or I can put my bishop on h5. What do you guys think? What do we have? h5 or h7? Let's... Arnav is just being practical now. He's saying h5 looks a lot more easier. Yeah, so bishop h5 is a simple idea, right? We have an easy no king f7 after g7. That's correct, yeah? And also bishop h7 does the same in some sense. When I play g7, there's no king f7. Zoe, you're right, actually, yeah? So I was going to ask that to the next question is what... So Anika wants to go bishop h7, so you can go to g8 and e6. Okay, so basically you're planning to play... Well, you're already going to be on e6, Anika. From e6 only you can go to h7, yeah? You don't need to go the other way around. But the putting a bishop on h7, the idea is to play g7, right? But bishop on h7 has a serious problem. Let's see if anyone can tell me that. Bishop on h7, just a glaring problem. If you, again, your basic endgames should kick in. I also noticed that you have a class next session. I don't remember who it is, actually. I have to check it. The next class after this one is on this theme. Fortress, that's right. I'm seeing this in chat now. If the black king gets to g7, it's automatically a draw. I will give up my bishop for the d pawn, and you have just put your bishop and pawn in such a bad shape that it'll never get out. So black achieves a fortress. So bishop on h5 is the only way to win this one. Again, it's a very small thing, but I think it's very instructive, right? If you get this in a game, you might figure it out with trial and error, but it's another thing to really know this. So now let's play it out. We've been talking about this for quite a while. So let's do this. By the way, I got this move from a lot of players early on. Yes, this works, but very temporary, because if I do this, I don't think you can stop me from going around. I'm still going to go b3 and a4. And when you play some bishop c3, I can just waste a move with my bishop and you will be in a zugzwang again. So I'm not sure how you can really stop me. It's a temporary stop, yeah? So I'm going to ignore that. And let's say play something else, king here, bishop here, and king b5. So this idea was suggested by a few. This is it. We got a simple draw, right? King on c7, and just do not allow the white king to go to b6. That's the key, right? If the white king reaches b6, white wins, because you won't be able to stop me to go to b7. And then from then on, the whole process becomes unstoppable, right? So you put the king on c7. The only place I won't keep the bishop is e5. Everywhere else you should be fine, because if I go here, you will check me. And if I go here, you can check me again. And then you can play king d6, right? The reason I said why you should not put the king on bishop on e5 is, of course, you will see that if I play king c5, now it becomes a little tricky, right? Watch. I think it's probably lost. I should not say tricky because bishop d6 check, I go king d4. Problem is I'm threatening this move and I'm threatening this move if you move the bishop. And this is already lost because now I have just both king entry points and you just cannot stop me, right? So this is a drawn endgame. Yeah, so that's good. But again, by no means it's like super, super simple. I mean, of course, you have some basic ideas, but there are so many tiny nuances in this endgame. And if you know everything inside out, you can also, when something changes, you will easily understand what's going on, right? So if the white king gets to c6, you win, right? That's the key. If the white king actually gets to c6, you'll be able to win the game with this bishop h5 idea, right? Okay, let's make one more change. So we did this, yeah? So let's try, let me reverse the position a little bit and make a few more changes. Let's bring the pawn over here. Ryo, these are practical endgames too. I have actually tons of games played in these endgames, in these positions. Okay, let's say this one. All right. What do we think? Let's try to give a result again, as always. Rohan has already given me a result. Yeah, let's make it white to play. See, I need to see 29 answers. I don't think I'm seeing that much. All of you need to give me a result. Gary's giving me a result with a question mark. Unfortunately, I don't know what that means. I'm not good with these. Okay, that's what it is. Okay, you need to explain those things to me. Okay. So this is black should offer a draw. Yes, Gary, I understand. I'm just joking. Of course, a question mark, throwing the question back at me. Okay, guys, who wants to try to explain this? I get a lot of wins, okay? So tell me if somebody wants to explain why you think it's winning. Okay, Rohan, you can go.
I think this is winning because if white gets the king to f5, to g5, then he can play king f6, kicking out the bishop on e6.
Okay, so that should end up being a win, yeah?
Yeah.
If the king goes to f6, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, that's a good starting point. But I want all of you to think about this, right? Remember, we just learned a position. We just saw something. We just kind of studied a few positions and we established the results of those. And you have to try to use some of this information to make better decisions, right? That's important. No problem, Tori. See you next time. So first question is, what similarity do we have in this position from the previous position we just saw? Who can tell me the similarity from the previous position? Let's see any raised hands. Anika.
Wait, so for like the last position, I think it was kind of similar because of the pawn structure.
The pawn formation. I can't hear you very clearly, but yeah. You said opposite color bishops. That's that's good. It better be opposite color bishops because that's what we're learning today, right? The main idea is the knight pawn, yeah? I hope all of you notice that there's a knight pawn, right? Previously, we decided that if it's a bishop pawn, then there's plenty of space for the king to get in from both sides. I'll get in this way, I'll get in this way, and whichever pawn your bishop is guarding, the king will eventually find some ways to get in. But now we do see a knight pawn, right? That's the similarity more than anything else. The king blocking the pawn, the bishop blocking the pawn, Angela, that is true. Opposite color bishops is true. But the most important thing we learned is that knight pawn. So what does this tell you for a defensive strategy? Because last position when we had a knight pawn, we drew the game, if you remember right. And most of you said this is winning. So now I see it. So Zoe and Austin, you want to move the bishop. There's a switch that you want to do, right? Knight pawns are not good for winning. It's good for drawing, yeah? Because knight pawns, the problem like we saw is that the king doesn't get a lot of entry points, right? But there is a tiny difference in this position though. That's another thing that I want you to remember. Arnav is pointing out the difference. Maybe let the pawn advance, but the pawn might not advance. The pawn is not on b6. It's on b4. Yeah? So with the pawn being on b4, is there any other difference? So first question, I'm going to ask you this, right? You get a magic switch. If you want right now, you can switch your king and bishop. Was that a draw? Because it's very important in these endgames to understand what you're trying to do. If you don't even know what the goal is, you won't be able to achieve anything. So first, let's figure out the goal. If I switch right now, is this a draw? Who wants to explain why it's a win? If I switch, I see some of you are saying it's still a win. Okay. Gary? Oh, I have to unmute you. And Evan, I'll come to you next.
Maybe it's a win because, well, the thing is you can go king d4, king c5, and so you're going to be pushing your pawn eventually. And
but pushing the pawn eventually, is that really how we win the game? If let's assume this pawn is on b6.
We don't put the pawn on b6 because then the bishop can go on the long diagonal, and that's probably a draw. But the main thing you do is you put the king, like you bring the king up first. That's what you have to do, I think. So
the main reason why you're saying it's a win is because the pawn is not on b6 blocking my king, so you're going to get your king up first.
Yeah. The only thing I'm not sure about, though, if that's okay, if I can ask a question.
Sure.
Is so if you go so say you switch right. Eventually, I don't know. You move a pawns on eventually at some point you have to put a pawn on b5, right? And so the only way for the pawn to be on b5 is if your king's on c5, b6, or a5. And so if it's on one of those, yeah. So if you go to if you play b5, and then the bishop just moves oh wait, never mind. Okay, I think never mind. Sorry.
Okay, so you have some idea. We'll get back to this. It feels like you're questioning some of those things, which is correct, but we'll come back to this. Evan.
I think it could be a win. Because I could play king d4, and I'm not sure. I think he could come in with king c5 next.
So the same thing like Gary. You're saying the king will get in first, yeah?
Yes.
Okay. Is there anyone who wants to argue for a draw? Is there anyone who wants to still make a point saying it's a draw? Aradhya says he wants to say it's still a draw. Go on, Aradhya.
I know that was for at that year. I think it's a win, but the reason I said me is because for the last question you asked.
Oh, okay, no problem. How about this? Now I'll give you an input. It is a draw. Let's see if anyone can find the draw. Okay, let's just play some moves and make the switch. You wanted to make the switch. Let's just make the switch. And I will leave this something like this, and okay. So king being on c3 or e3 shouldn't make much of a difference, I think. Okay, let's say white to play right now. Of course, I don't want to lose my pawn. So white to play, Anika. Actually, it doesn't depend so much on the turn at all. I think this should still be a draw, pretty straightforward, yeah? Make sure you get only one shot, Gary. So I want you to think about it first. Do you have a draw for sure? Because I have the same plan that you just told me. I'm going to get my king in before I push my pawn. So my king gets further in, then I can definitely play b6, b7, and then win the game. So you have to be very careful about that, right? Anika says she has a draw for sure. Are you sure, Anika? Again, I'm going to give you a heads up. This is my plan. Very simple, which you guys explained to me. So I want to play king in, and at some point maybe put the bishop on c3 to defend this, or put it on f4. It doesn't really matter. I'm flexible. And then I want to play b5, maybe king c6, king b6. I don't know how, but the king gets in first, and then b6, b7. I have a very, very straightforward plan. Okay, let's see. Gary, you still have a draw? Go on, explain.
Okay, I think I have a draw. So basically, when the king gets to c5, I don't know. Say you go like king d4. I don't know, some random bishop f1, king c5. Then I think the key is to go king d7.
Okay.
So okay, if you go king d5, you go bishop to 2 check. You have to move back. And then, I mean, I think it's probably a draw.
Well, you made the most important point, correct? Yeah. So king on d7 is because you have to stop king c6. So let's look at this. King d4. Let's say you just kind of wait somewhere, and I'll play bishop c3. Let's say wait somewhere, and king c5. Now the bishop pulls away, of course, and now the king doesn't have to be in d7 because actually, yeah, right now king d7 is not required. But I would say yes, maybe better to keep the king there with the bishop somewhere back. The reason why this can still work is, of course, now you can check me. And I don't get to play b5 because if I go further out, you simply come back and guard it. Yeah. So the only way for me to play this pawn push is to keep my king on b6. Now you can play king here anyways. But let's do it the correct way. So let's say after king d4, let's pull the bishop this way. And let's keep waiting here. The minute you play king c5, I'll play king d7. So this is more be exact, right? What Gary was mentioning is that you always stop c6, right? And let's say play b5. The key is you have two forms of defense. One is this, the other one is this. This is how you're stopping my king from advancing. And I really cannot advance anymore because if I play king d5, you'll simply check me, right? And if I play king b6, you simply wait. So let's say wait, you play king b6 and I simply wait. King a6 doesn't do anything. Let's say play king a5. What will you all play? Type it in chat. Let's hear a move. I have a threat. Keep that in mind. Austin, if you wait, you might be in little trouble because I have a threat. Rohan, what's your move? What would you like to explain? Go on.
So here I think king c7.
Okay.
And white's best move is probably e6.
Yes.
And
so
then
when you
first
question is, do you want to really allow me to play e6 and e7? Do you think that's good? Why are you letting me do that?
Because then we can play bishop e8.
I know. So think about this. Right now you can stop me on e6, right? Or you can let me push the pawn to e7 and stop me on e8. Which one's better for defending? Stopping on e6, right? So you should never think of conceding something thinking I can still hold, right? That's not a good defensive strategy, right? When you start giving this much and this much and this much, eventually you will end up giving everything, and that's how we lose a game. If you're defending, right, don't give anything. Don't give anything, right? So, oh wait, the pawn goes to e7, I can still block it. No, actually it doesn't work. If the pawn goes to e7, the king goes all the way around, you just immediately lose the game, right? So by the way, yeah, bishop f3 is the move. I see a lot of you have given bishop f3. The problem with waiting is, what if I play this move? And now you are stuck in the wrong diagonal. How are you going to switch? Your bishop should be on b7. And you're kind of stuck in the wrong diagonal. And if you ever take help from the king, you're going to run into e6. So this is, I think this is lost. I don't know. I'm probably sure, yeah. So you should just make sure you play bishop f3. And if I play b7, you switch the bishop back. So the timing is a little important. That's all. But let's say play king a6 or king b6, you just go right back. So one of the key concepts of making this draw in this opposite color bishop endgame is you keep an eye on this pawn, right? So restricting a king's motion is very, very important. You have to stop your opponent's king from moving anywhere. And keeping an eye on this pawn is going to be an extremely important part to actually get this draw. So going back, this is a draw. You just put the king on d7, put the bishop on e2 or something, then you'll be fine, right? So the question then becomes, can you switch? Do you have time to switch? That's the only question right now. We're coming back to the initial position and saying, do you have enough time to switch? Austin, can you tell me a variation? If you tell me if you do have enough time, can you just give me a variation? Well, I told you it's a draw if the king switched, Zoe. I didn't give you this is a draw. If the king is on e6 and bishop is on b5, we know it's a draw. Because remember this, you have a knight pawn, and the bishop needs to be guarding the knight pawn to establish this blockade we just talked about, right? Right now, the bishop is guarding the e pawn. And this will be completely lost if my king gets to f6. Actually, what's the last known position we saw, right? King gets to f6 and pawn gets to b6. Remember that? If the king gets to f6 and pawn gets to b6, we know it's a win. Because I'll put my bishop on a5. Sorry, that was a bad diagonal. This is the diagonal we just saw on the other side of the board, right? So that's my known winning position I'll get to. Okay, so let's try playing this. Austin says king c6, king d4, bishop d7. Okay, let me try this move, Austin. What do you do? How are you going to switch? It seems like we have some issues, yeah? What will you play here? We can't switch, says Aradhya. Well, any other move instead of bishop d7 that can be played? It's kind of critical here. It has to be, shouldn't be able to switch. Well, let's not give up that quickly. All I need is my king to get to e6. That's it. Even if I let the pawn go up, I don't care, yeah? Just the king getting it. Of course, if I do it right now, this is probably lost with king c5. Actually, no. Remember? Tell me a move for black. Let's see. Let's see how much you understand. If you want to make a draw, what would you play? King c7. I'm going to play b5. King c7, b5 followed by bishop a5 check. You'll be in trouble. Yeah, I think Austin, Zoe, bishop comes around somewhere here, right? Remember, you just want to be on this long diagonal or on this diagonal defending that pawn push. That's all you have to do. So simply put the bishop anywhere here should just work, right? Again, see, understanding the previous position helps you make the decision here so much better. This is why you have to study incrementally from the theoretical endgame and then slowly move back. So king d7 is actually possible in that case, right? I mean, I have a very specific position that I want to ask. Let me try to see if I can pick that up. Actually, it looks like I had the same position as... okay, I'm going to change this position with the king on d4 and make it white to play. That actually makes it a lot more interesting. Lot more interesting. So we got an extra move. So the king is on d4. I can already start going king e4, king f4. By the way, black can still hold. Just giving you a heads up. Can you find the correct variations to hold? I'm going to play king e4. King f4, king g5, king f6. Let's see if someone can give me a variation. How can you hold? King c6, king e4. Oh, Aradhya, I cannot play e6. The bishop will take. By the way, I'd like to also establish one thing, right? We said that king on f6 and pawn on b6 is winning. Can anyone tell me if king on f6 and pawn on b4 is winning? If let's say if white king gets to f6, is it winning? What do you think? Yeah, it will become a win because you cannot stop me from playing b5 at that point. Because remember the good old zugzwang that we used to get? By king on f6, your king will be on, let's say, d7 and bishop will be on c4. I'll simply waste a move. And then you will not be able to stop me from playing b5, right? I get to play b5, b6, and then we know how to win that one already. So one more level of understanding. The king gets to f6, you are done. So before the white king gets to f6, you have to get to e6 and make sure that doesn't happen. So who can give me a variation? Remember this, you're not worried about the b pawn running up. You can always stop that pawn on b6. So don't be worried about that b pawn too much. Be worried about getting your king in. Bye now. So we should probably wrap this up in about 5 minutes. So Evan, okay, so give me a variation or a continuation. So king e4, king c6, what happens after that? I play king f4. Then king d5, okay. So let's say king d5, I play bishop e3. King d7, I play king g5, I think. Or actually king d7, I can also play b5. Okay, let me answer one at a time, yeah? So, okay, Rohan is giving me a variation. So, Rohan, unfortunately, you let the king go to f6. So, you don't have to worry about anything anymore. If the white king goes to f6, you're lost. So, don't worry about that. Don't calculate anything further because that's the reason we established the earlier positions. The king on f6 wins, right? So we play king e4, king c6, and king here. Looks like I've got two different variations. Some of you are going king d7, some of you are going king d5, right? Yes, Evan.
King d7, king g5, king e7.
King d7, maybe I can go b5.
Bishop. Well, maybe bishop d5.
B6. Actually, bishop d5. Maybe king f5.
King e7.
Okay, so you're getting a king to e7, yeah?
Yes.
Okay, I want all of you to answer this. We are at a very interesting point. I think, Evan, you have a very nice variation, but let's see how many of you can connect what you have learned before, okay? So let's look at this variation. King d7, b5, bishop d5, king f5, king e7. Will this be a win or will this be a draw? And you have to tell me why. Aradhya, this is not the b6 bishop a5 position. No, not yet. b6 bishop a5 only works if the king is on f6. So Evan has stopped us from getting to f6. But there is something else we learned. When we learned a draw with the knight pawn, we also learned a winning plan. And we saw how black is supposed to stop that winning plan. Let's see if anyone can connect it. I know it's a little tricky, but these are the connections you have to make. White's winning here. Yep, Zoe, thank you. King g6. Remember, we are supposed to stop the king from going to g6, g7 and going around. And we had already studied that idea, right? So it's very, I know you have to do this multiple times to put all these things into one place. But now if I go king g6, I think it's just game over because you cannot stop me from going king g7 and you cannot stop me from playing b6. So let's say you play this, I defend. And yeah, nothing is going to change now. I'm going to go king g7, king f8, the same old trick. And I will make you move the king and then get to f6 again and win the game. So, Evan, you came very, very close to doing it. So let's see if you can switch your move order a little bit.
I have a question.
Yes.
Can you go back again?
Wait, which position?
Like all the way forward.
Right here?
No, like forward. I mean.
Oh, forward. Okay, so you want to go bishop d5, king f5, king e7, king g6. Yes.
Oh no.
I mean, I'm just showing you typically what will happen. So let's say pawn push king here, and I'm going to play something like this.
How about bishop c6?
King here.
Oh.
And you will be in a zugzwang.
Okay.
You're forced to play king d7. I'll play king here, and then just the way we saw that last time, right? So the idea is quite straightforward. King e7 is the correct idea, right? So after b5, you can play king e7 first. And let's say I play b6 now. Now you should all know what the drawing move is. I mean, you have only two options. One of them loses. So, yep. Bishop to c8, right? Bishop to d5 is losing because of king f5. Bishop c8 keeps an eye on f5. Remember this, when you switch, it's always a good idea to switch like this, right? Okay, let's see again. King g5, what will you play? As black. What's the drawing move? Oh, Zoe, you did not go with the right one. Aradhya, no. Austin and who else got it? Gary got it. Yep. Now I think everyone is getting it. That's right. You have to stop me from playing king g6. Don't forget that. You have to play king f7. Again, you got yourself a draw. Now you go bishop here, hang around here. Not a problem, right? Okay, so some of the things that we established here is that the king getting in is kind of important. We know the bishop pawn and the knight pawn situation. If you have a knight pawn, make sure you blockade with your bishop for the knight pawn, and the king goes to the other side, and then you will still be able to hold. And wait, so Zoe has king e6, bishop c3, king f7. Okay, yeah, you are attacking the pawn. So fair enough, Zoe. But the idea is that you have to put your king on f7 to stop me from playing king g6. Yeah. Okay, hopefully you all learned this. Now remember this. If you do not ever look at this and go to games and at some point hope to remember this, it's not probably going to happen. Typically in 2 months, bits of it will be there. In 6 months, you'll be like, wait, I've seen this somewhere. I know something about this position is what's going to happen to you. So definitely go over it again, right? Look through them one more time, two more, like twice, thrice, and just like, let's say 3 times, you're set. You will be good for opposite color bishop endgame for life. After that, you don't need to worry about it. All right. Thank you, everyone. We'll wrap this lecture with that.